everybody, mel0n here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a mouse pad I've actually been wanting to take a look at for quite a long time now. We are taking a look at the RAZER Strider. Now the reason why I want to take a look at this pad, even though it is a bit of an older pad, is that this pad supposedly combines the strengths of both a hard pad and a soft pad into one pad, but it's not advertised as a hybrid pad, which kind of caught my eye because hybrid pads are not anything new. We've seen a lot of them on the market, and I do actually quite like hybrid pads. However, this one is marketed a little oddly, which makes me think that there may be something different going on with the Strider here, but it'll be interesting to see how it compares against pads like the Focus Ambition and other hybrid pads I have in my collection, but I figured this would be a good time to finally check it out. So today we're going to do a quick unboxing and first impressions of the RAZER Strider. As always, I will have a full review of this pad out in a couple weeks, but today's just going to be a first impressions. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, before we get started, just a quick disclaimer: I purchased this pad myself. This review is not sponsored or endorsed by RAZER in any way, shape, or form. Alrighty, let's get started. So here we have the RAZER Strider. This is the Quartz edition. Now, this is the large version that comes in at $29.99 USD. There is also an extra large version available for around $59 USD. This is available in black. There is a chroma version with like chroma RGB lighting around the sides, and then there's also the pink Quartz edition that we'll be looking at today. Now, in terms of dimensions, the RAZER Strider I have here, the large version, is 450 millimeters by 400 millimeters, so pretty standard sizing for a mouse pad of this variety. Now, one thing I'd love to see right off the top is that this mouse pad is completely flat packed. That is a great thing to see. A lot of mouse pads lately that I've reviewed have not been flat packed, and that just causes a variety of issues. So I'm really glad to see that RAZER has gone ahead and flat packed the Strider here. That's a really nice change of pace. Would have loved to see the GSR have a similar packaging to this one, but that's okay. All right, let's go ahead and unbox it. Nice little pull tab at the top there. Okay, and we can just slide the pad out just like that. So very easy unboxing experience, which is great to see. And then in terms of accessories, all we have is a little nice kind of pink RAZER sticker. It's just kind of cool to see it included. That's nice to see. Now, the pad itself does feel pretty solid off the top. It does have a very kind of flexible feel to it. It reminds me a lot of like how the Aqua Control Pluses feel, but it does have a very nice feel to it. It does have this interesting rubber base on the bottom. Now, this isn't Poron, this is just like a standard rubber base, but it does have this very cool kind of hex design on the bottom, as you can see there. So let's see how it holds up on the desk. So it doesn't pass the finger tests. Okay, so this is exactly like the bases on the Zowie GSR2 and the Infinity mice pads then, where it doesn't pass the one finger test. Like, you can push the sides in pretty easily, but once there's pressure applied to the top, it's pretty hard to move. So as long as you have your arm resting on it, the pad's not going to move anywhere, which is nice to see. Now, the edge stitching on the Strider actually looks to be quite good. It's a little wider of a stitch than I normally see on a lot of other mouse pads, but it does look pretty solid. I don't see any QC issues with the stitching overall. It does have a nice little RAZER branding up at the top here, kind of similar to what we saw with the GSR2, which is nice to see. But the stitching itself on the side actually looks to be surface level, which is really nice to see. So if you're moving your arm across the pad or up and down, you won't feel too much of a hump here, which is nice to see. So that's a nice little attention to detail there. All right, let's talk surface texture. Now, this is a rather unique surface texture I don't think I've experienced before. The Strider has this kind of bumpy, very abrasive surface texture. It reminds me a lot of how the Aqua Control Plus felt, but it's even more abrasive to that. But at the same time, it's also still kind of soft to the hand, but it does feel pretty consistent in its abrasion on the X and Y axis, which is nice to see. Now, as I mentioned before, this pad is unique because it's a hybridization of a soft and a hard pad. Now, I'm interested to see how the softness of the pad is. And the pad is actually, it does have some softness, but it's not up there with the GSR2. It's like a little softer than the GSR2. Obviously the Infinity mice pads are significantly softer. Those are very, very soft. This one's like I would honestly say this is more of like a medium hardness. So it does have some softness, but you'd have to put a lot of pressure on your mouse to actually feel that extra control. So I have a feeling a lot of the control you're going to feel on this pad is going to be from this kind of rigid, bumpy surface texture. Now, I'm going to grab a couple mice here to do some quick little performance testing. All right, so I did a couple runs on Kovacs, and I have a couple thoughts of how this feels with the Jade Donut Skates from X-Ray pad on my OGM Cloud. Now, first off, tracking on this pad is surprisingly really good. I don't know why, but like, you do definitely feel a lot of feedback from the pad because it is this very gritty, rough texture to the hand. But on the skates, it actually feels pretty solid. You do feel a lot of it through the skates, but your tracking is actually pretty solid for the most part. I do notice that in some areas it can be kind of jittery just due to how bumpy the surface is. But I feel like on larger surface area skates, that wouldn't be as big of a problem. With donut skates, it may not. It may be a bit of more of an issue. but I will say tracking feels really solid. What feels weird right now is static performance, because this pad is so fast and there's no stopping power. Like the texturing on the top doesn't really give you a lot of control, and on top of that the pad isn't really soft, so you can't push into the pad to get more control like you can on the GSR2 or the Infinity mice pads. So I find myself often over or undershooting quite a bit. Now obviously I will get used to this over time as I get used to the pad, but that is one thing I noticed right off the top. Now again, I am using a faster mouse skate, I am using the Jade Donuts, but these are larger surface area skates, which I expected to give a lot more control, and they do give a lot more control on other pads. I think the reason why this feels so fast is just because the unevenness of the surface isn't giving 100% contact area with these skates, which is probably why it's making it feel so fast. But we'll have to see how it holds up during testing. Alrighty, now when it comes to my Keychron M2 with the X-Ray Pad Jade dot skates on them, they feel fairly similar to how it felt on the OGM Cloud. However, I did find that this was actually a little slower, probably because these are more worked in, because I've had these on here for a couple months now, whereas the ones on my OGM Cloud are pretty much brand new. But I will say, very similar in terms of performance, is very, very smooth tracking. I would say maybe a little smoother than it was on the dots, but again, just because these are worn in, that's probably why. Pretty much one for one, I didn't really notice any differences. Static performance was still kind of hard because there's just so little friction from the surface. It's hard to kind of stay on target and like micro adjust on time. But again, considering that these are speed skates, that's to be expected. Let's go ahead and try out the Obsidian Pros that are on my X2H, and we'll see how that feels here on the RAZER Strider. And then when we're talking about the Obsidian Pros that are on my X2H, these felt the best out of everything else. Now, while these are still dot skates, because these are a polyurethane resin, they do feel a little stickier than other skates do. I do find they have kind of an odd kind of stickiness to them when you're using on non-glass pads, and it actually felt way better than the other ones did on this mouse pad particularly. The glide is still very consistent, but there's a lot more friction between the actual skates and the surface itself due to the material changes on the Obsidian Pros, so it makes these a lot better for static performance. Again, I'm still pretty rusty right now, for my static is pretty bad, but they do feel a lot more consistent, which is nice to see. Again, there'll probably be a lot of time of me getting used to this pad, but it does feel a lot more consistent. You don't have as much speed as you did on the Jades, obviously, but it is still relatively controlled. I'd be really interested to see how the hardened PTFE versions of the Obsidians, like the regular Obsidian dots, feel, but the Obsidian Pros do feel quite good on this one. Again, with this pad, I feel like this is going to be a situation where the larger surface area skates are actually going to work well for you, because I prefer dots and I prefer playing on slower pads, whereas this seems to be a very fast pad where dots may not be as ideal. So if I can get my hands on a set of really large surface area skates, I'll have to test those. But overall, off of what I just tested here briefly, the Obsidian dots felt the best overall, but obviously I'll do a lot more testing of different skates and different skate sizes for the full review, of course. Now, one thing I did want to mention, because of this abrasiveness of this surface, I do find my arm is getting kind of irritated from gliding over top of it, because this is a very rough surface. I'm gonna have to do a lot of testing with arm sleeves, because this is probably going to be a pad where you're gonna have to wear an arm sleeve just to prevent like wear on the bottom of your arm, because again, I have pretty hairy arms, but I already feel a little bit of irritation specifically around this area where I rest my hand on the mouse pad, and there's a lot of extra friction from this as well, so that also could be potentially causing inconsistencies in my performance. But I'll have to do some testing with arm sleeves for the full review to see how those feel, of course. Alrighty, well that wraps up my quick unboxing and first impressions of the RAZER Strider. I'm actually quite glad I gave this pad a chance and decided to give it a go, because this is a very unique pad, because the surfacing is very odd. I really haven't used another pad with a very high abrasion, like bumpy surface before. This is something very unique. I'm excited to see how this actually holds out during testing, because again, unique pads are always fun to mess around with. But anyways, as I mentioned before, I will have a full review of this pad out in a couple weeks, where I'll be doing a lot more testing of different skate types and different skate sizes, as well as moisture testing, humidity testing, and a bunch of other things. So I will have a much more in-depth breakdown about the RAZER Strider in a couple weeks following this video, so to get subscribed so you don't miss that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the brief unboxing and first impressions video. Thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the full review. Peace.